Hello, my name is Oliver Schnusenberg, and I'm a professor of finance at the University of North Florida, where I teach, among other classes, behavioral finance. I'm also currently a student at King's College London, where I'm studying psychology and neuroscience and mental health, which is a master's program, an online master's program. So this is my first attempt to merge the two areas, and that is to look into an already existing area, which is neurofinance, which is a neuroscientific application of behavioral finance, as we will see. So in this presentation, I will briefly define what exactly neurofinance is and then go over some of the limitations and advantages that this new and emerging field offers. I'll also look at the brain structures, neurotransmitters, and hormones, as well as neuroimaging techniques that have been utilized in the field of neurofinance so far. And then I will go into some specific experiments in neurofinance, in particular to do with herding behavior, and then talk about the conclusion. So, what is neurofinance? Well, neurofinance is an enrichment of behavioral finance, and it adds a physiological dimension to behavioral finance, with the hope that physiology and psychology combined provide a more complete picture. So, behavioral finance has done a lot in furthering our understanding about how people make decisions that are often driven by biases, heuristics, and emotions. With the emergence of neuroscience, the study of essentially any science that benefits from the study of the structure and function of the brain, and is largely fueled by technological innovations such as functional MRIs, transcranial magnetic stimulation like TMS, electroencephalography or EEG, skin conductivity receptors, eye trackers, neurotransmitter analysis, and genome maps. So with all those developments has emerged an area of neurofinance. So neurofinance is an interdisciplinary field that blends financial theory, psychology, and neuroscientific knowledge to elucidate the prevalent irrational actions of financial professionals. A relatively straightforward way of thinking about the difference between behavioral finance and neurofinance is that behavioral finance addresses not only the what of financial decision making, but also the underlying psychological dimensions. We know that people make irrational decisions because of, for example, confirmation bias. And we can speculate why people commit this bias based on psychological theories and evidence. We know that people make traditionally irrational decisions when it comes to gambling because they are loss averse. We know that angry people are less risk averse. We know these things because they have been tested over and over again in behavioral labs, through surveys, and through real world data and experiments. Okay. Neurofinance, on the other hand, addresses the physiological aspect of this behavior. What mental operations cause people to exhibit confirmation bias? When people are loss averse, how does the brain behave at that moment in time, and which areas light up? When people are angry or exhibit other types of emotions, are there other brain areas that are affected, and why is that? In short, behavioral finance identifies all the biases and heuristics and emotions that affect our actual behavior, while neurofinance seeks to understand the physiological underpinnings of these biases. What are the triggers and what are the associated mental pathways? So neurofinance is the relationship between financial behavior and brain activities rather than just the psychological explanation of behavior. It adds the physiological dimension to the psychological dimension. And it is that contribution that will ultimately, hopefully, bring us closer to understanding human financial behavior and may ultimately result in a unified behavioral theory. Okay. It may even result in an entirely new profession, one which is already emerging in the form of financial therapy. So the research in behavioral finance and neurofinance has increased dramatically. So behavioral finance research exploded from about 45,000 keyword mentions in the 1980s to over 185,000 in the 2010s. At the time of this presentation in late 2023, the key phrase behavioral finance was already mentioned 50,000 times in published articles. So total mentions from the 1980s to today are about 448,000 in keywords. Okay. From the broader field of behavioral economics, there were over 725,000 mentions in the same time frame. In contrast, neurofinance is a very emerging field with a total of only 76 mentions since the 1990s. There were none before that. Clearly, this is an emerging field that is increasingly capturing our attention. The broader field of neuroeconomics has garnered over 3,900 mentions since the 2000s. And again, there were none prior to that. So slowly but surely, there's an increasing trend of publications in neuroeconomics and neurofinance. And the literature that is out there so far, a lot of them literature reviews, illustrates this. In 2012, there was a study that by Sahi that listed a mere 8 empirical studies in their literature review. So there's not that many, but things are happening slowly but surely. So how exactly is neurofinance useful? Well, it's useful in multiple different ways and to enhance our understanding of behavioral finance. First, neurofinance allows researchers to identify specific neural pathways and mechanisms associated with behavioral biases. Second, often behavioral finance relies on self-reported data, while the physiological data provided by neurofinance research is much more objective. Third, neurofinance can help us understand when, during the decision-making process, biases come into play, which is crucial for designing desirable intervention. Fourth, neurofinance research can help us understand why some individuals are more susceptible to certain biases while others are not, which can form the basis for personalized financial strategies. Yet another useful area of neurofinance is that by identifying neural markets associated with biases, neurofinance can enable early detection of biases, which can be valuable for financial professionals and investors. Neurofinance can also assess the effectiveness of interventions designed to counteract behavioral biases by comparing neural responses before and after interventions. Combining behavioral data with neural and physiological data can lead to more comprehensive models that better explain and predict financial decision making. Lastly, neurofinance insights can lead to the design of financial products, decision support tools, and educational programs in the real world. It should be mentioned, however, that there's also several potential limitations to neurofinance research. So for one, an increasing development of neurofinance would require university finance departments to invest in some of the required neuroimaging tools to carry out research studies. So it may prove to be difficult as universities already have these tools available, albeit in different departments. An elegant solution would therefore probably require co-authorship not only across disciplines but across colleges. An even more obvious obstacle standing in the way of advanced neurofinance research is the lack of qualifications of finance faculty. Virtually no finance faculty are trained neuroscientifically, at least not with doctoral degrees. Consequently, it would be difficult for finance faculty to conduct this type of research without co-authoring with people in other disciplines. Many studies investigating neurofinance, even the ones that review tools and techniques employed, are not basic enough, and significant resources would have to be expanded to train finance faculty in this area, which frankly may not even be desirable for most finance faculty. There's a reason finance faculty obtain terminal degrees in this area rather than the social sciences. Finance involves complex decision-making processes, risk analysis, and numerical reasoning, which are often associated with the prefrontal cortex and areas involved in executive functions, such as planning and problem solving. Conversely, Neuroscience is more closely associated with the understanding of brain structure, function, and the intricate workings of neural networks, which often engages areas related to perception, memory processing, language comprehension, and sensory motor coordination. Yet another disadvantage or limitation would be that neuroscience results are really measuring the response to financial variables, or are they measuring something else, the response to something else? Also, in the real world, behavior and physiological responses in the lab may not translate. Okay. Lastly, in terms of practical applications, what are the actual practical applications from knowing which brain area is activated in an experiment? And lastly, are invasive procedures too invasive? Or are the results used to manipulate, or are they used inequitably to benefit certain groups? Those are some ethical concerns that we also need to consider. It is, however, these same limitations that also lead to opportunities in neurofinance research, such as collaboration. So this would allow us to partner with neuroscientists or cognitive psychologists who have expertise in brain imaging techniques to design experiments, collect data, and interpret the results accordingly. This will provide for richer interpretations of the data from a multidisciplinary perspective to provide a more thorough understanding of behavioral models. And this may even lead to education programs where colleagues from different colleges can conduct workshops to educate each other in each other's fields. So there are a variety of literature reviews in this area that have already been conducted, such as the ones by Beckler and Germain in 2018, by Mianlarzuska et al. In 2019, and by Srivastava et al. In 2019 and 2020. So the purpose of this study was not to conduct a literature review, rather it was to identify the brain areas, the neurotransmitters and hormones and neuroimaging techniques that have already been used in this literature. And the list is quite extensive here. This slide shows just a sample of the identified brain areas. So what we did is we used a generative scientific academic AI, SciSpace, to identify in these areas all the brain regions that have been investigated. But we then took this one step further, and what we did, we used another AI, just ChatGPT, to then identify the brain functions that are associated with those areas, which allowed us to sort the areas then, the brain areas, by function. So that if anyone wants to investigate, for example, addiction and compulsive behavior, they know where to look. So this slide simply provides an example of this. There are multiple more functions that are listed in the paper. But to give a couple of examples, so addiction and compulsive behaviors, we would look in the amygdala, the nucleus accumbens, the orbitofrontal cortex, and the ventral striatum. For reward processing and motivation, for example, we would look at the nucleus accumbens, the ventral striatum, the ventral tegmental area, and the amygdala. So you can see how different brain areas are involved in different functions, but multiple functions are associated with a specific brain area. But this would help us a lot in neuroscientific research to at least know where to start looking. So next we looked at neurotransmitters that have already been investigated in the neurofinance literature. So there are dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin are three of the most common ones. So dopamine, as you probably know, is a very versatile neurotransmitter and plays a key role in the brain's reward system, contributing to feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. It is also involved in reinforcing behaviors associated with pleasurable experiences. It also helps regulate movement and coordination, and inadequate dopamine production is associated with movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease, for example. Okay. So it has multiple functions. Norepinephrine is also a versatile neurotransmitter. Overall, it plays a crucial role in the body's stress response, mood regulation, attentional processes, autonomic functions, and pain modulation. And more specific functions are listed here. Yeah. Serotonin is another neurotransmitter that has been investigated in the neurofinance literature. It serves as an essential regulator of mood states, sleep patterns, appetite control, cognitive functions, and social behavior within the body. And again, more specific functions are detailed on the slide. There are also some hormones that have been investigated, like cortisol, testosterone, and vasopressin. Okay. Cortisol is often referred to as the stress hormone and serves primarily a stress response role by regulating the physiological reactions to stressors and mobilizing energy reserves and increasing alertness. Also has a metabolic function, but that is not that important in this research. Testosterone is well known to almost everyone, but its versatile functions related to male physiology may not be. So it's crucial for the development of male reproductive organs during fetal development and puberty, plays a role in the production of sperm within the testes, and also contributes to the development of secondary sexual characteristics in males such as facial and body hair growth, deepening of the voice, and muscle mass development. It influences sex drive as well as erectile function and overall sexual performance, and helps maintain bone density and promotes muscle strength and mass. But, and this is important, it also plays a role in cognitive functions, especially spatial abilities, memory, and verbal processing. So overall, testosterone plays a crucial role in male reproductive health, sexual function, secondary sexual characteristic development, bone density maintenance, muscle mass regulation, and potentially cognitive functions. Lastly, vasopressin, a less well-known hormone, has also been used in neurofinance research. It is also known as antidiuretic hormone, ADH. Vasopressin acts on the kidneys to increase water reabsorption, reducing the amount of water excreted in urine, which helps to concentrate urine and conserve water in the body. But importantly, vasopressin constricts blood vessels, leading to increased vascular resistance and subsequent elevation of blood pressure, which helps to maintain adequate blood flow throughout the body. Okay. Lastly, and this is important for behavioral finance research potentially, vasopressin is involved in regulating social behaviors and bonding, particularly in mammals. The neuroimaging techniques that have been used in neurofinance research can be roughly divided into functional techniques, structural techniques, and electrophysiological techniques. So I will briefly address here some of the functional techniques, which are functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, positron emission tomography, or PET, and near-infrared spectroscopy, or NIRS. For the electrophysiological techniques, I will briefly talk about the electroencephalogram, the magnetoencephalography, and transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. So fMRI is used to measure brain activity by detecting changes in blood flow. It provides insight into which areas of the brain are involved in specific cognitive tasks or stimuli, and to study various aspects of brain function, including language processing, memory, emotion regulation, motor control, and sensory perception. PET, on the other hand, is used primarily to observe metabolic processes in the body. It's also used to diagnose certain conditions more accurately than some other imaging methods alone, due to its ability to display metabolic changes at very early stages before structural changes have occurred. It's also used to measure vital functions such as blood flow, oxygen use, and sugar metabolism, which helps doctors and researchers understand the health and function of tissues and organs. Near-infrared spectroscopy, or NIRS, is used to assess the concentration and oxygenation of hemoglobin in tissues such as the brain and muscle tissue. It is also used to monitor cerebral oxygenation in neonatal care and to conduct functional studies of the brain, which are less invasive than an fMRI, for example. An electroencephalogram is used to record and analyze the electrical activity of the brain and to diagnose, for example, epilepsy by detecting abnormal brainwave patterns. It can be used to evaluate various neurological conditions such as degenerative disorders and to monitor consciousness levels during surgeries. But it is also used to study brain functions related to perception, attention, memory, language processing, sleep patterns, and other cognitive processes. And again, the application here in the behavioral field is obvious. Magnetoencephalography is used to measure the magnetic fields produced by the electrical activity of the brain and to provide insights into neuronal processes, but also to create maps of brain activity in addition to various other functions. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, is used to non-invasively stimulate specific areas of the brain using magnetic fields, and to understand and modulate neural activity, but also to treat depression, but also to study how different brain regions contribute to specific cognitive functions. And again, the application here to behavioral finance and neurofinance is obvious if we wanted to know where certain functions are processed when it comes to certain biases. So what we did next is we looked at one specific phenomenon in behavioral finance, herding behavior, and we designed 3 different types of experiments. So one where a researcher has access to all possible equipment, including neuroimaging equipment, to minimal equipment, so maybe just to measure physiological responses like heart rate or skin conductance. And lastly, scenario where the researcher has no access to any equipment. So in the first type of experiment, we have access, the researcher has access to all types of equipment, neuroimaging and physiological equipment. So in this experiment, the participants would be experienced traders or investors who actively engage in financial markets. The task that they would be exposed to, which is the same over all 3 conditions, is a series of financial investment decisions. And each decision consists of choosing between 2 investment options, and then either some trial participants will receive information about other traders' decisions, or the same trial participants in some situations will receive it and in other situations will not. So what we expect here in the brain regions is when participants are exposed to information that other traders make similar decisions, we expect an increased activation in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and increased activation in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. We also expect altered activity in the anterior cingulate cortex. As far as neurotransmitters are concerned, changes in levels of dopamine like cortisol and oxytocin, which are related to stress response and reward processing, provide insight into the emotional responses that occur during herding. The second type of experiment, now without neuroimaging, but still with access to physiological and equipment and of course behavior, would repeat the same task with the same participants, but now what we are collecting is heart rate variability, skin conductance levels, and saliva samples for cortisol and oxytocin levels. Okay. Lastly, we're going to conduct some behavioral analysis by observing behavioral responses such as response time, choices made under herding cues, and emotional expressions. Now lastly, the last type of experiment with no equipment whatsoever, which is more like traditional behavioral finance research. Again, the participants and the task remain the same. However, now we only have access to behavioral data. So observers would record participant behavior during the decision-making process, including their body language, any verbal statements made relative to herding, and verbal or bodily responses to information about other traders' decisions. I think these 3 types of experiments really illustrate the richness that incorporating neuroscientific research into behavioral finance research provides. So we get a lot richer data set, and again, we can know when decisions are made, and we can design financial products accordingly to benefit people and hopefully nudge them in the direction of making correct financial decisions. I'd like to end with a quote by Michael Gazzaniga. a well-known neuroscientist from the University of California in Santa Barbara. So while the brain may be the hardware of the mind, it is experience that writes the software. And that is, I think, summarizes it very well, because we need both behavior and experience on the one hand, and we need neuroscience data on the other hand. Like, one can't function without the other, and behavioral finance is probably the more overarching field under which neurofinance will ultimately fall. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present this research, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on the information on this slide. Thank you so much.